The backstage corridor was lit only by the humming fluorescent lamps. Freddie Mercury had just stepped off stage for a short break. His voice still seemed to linger in the air, as if the echoes of Bohemian Rhapsody had woven themselves into the walls. He walked, sweat glistening on his face, his flowing cape trailing behind him, when he noticed a small figure standing near the restricted access door. Among the rushing security guards and frantic crew members, there was a thin boy, no older than 9, holding tightly onto his mother's hand. He wasn't shouting, he wasn't waving a program for an autograph. He simply stared at Freddie with wide eyes filled with something far deeper than excitement. That quiet presence in the middle of chaos made Freddie pause. He was used to roaring crowds, to fans screaming his name until their voices broke. But this boy's silence spoke louder than all of it. When security moved to usher the mother and child away, Freddie raised his hand and stopped them. He stepped closer, the muffled thunder of the stadium crowd still echoing behind him, blending with the distant thump of Roger's drums. Freddie leaned down slightly, bringing himself to the boy's height. "What's your name, little one?" he asked gently. The boy gripped his mother's hand tighter, swallowed hard, and whispered, "Thomas." Freddie's lips curled into a smile. He didn't know it yet, but this quiet moment in a dim backstage corridor would become one of the most unforgettable encounters of his life, because Thomas hadn't just come to see his idol. He had come with a question, one that would leave Freddie Mercury completely speechless. The sounds of the arena drifted faintly through the concrete. Walls, thousands of voices chanting Freddie's name, impatient for the next song. But in that backstage corridor, time seemed to slow. Freddie crouched down further, his sharp eyes scanning Thomas's face. The boy's skin was pale, his frame frail, but there was a light in his gaze that Freddie couldn't ignore. "Are you enjoying the show?" Freddie asked, expecting a shy nod or a smile. Instead, Thomas just stared back, almost studying him, as if he were searching for something beyond the sequins and bravado. It wasn't the usual adoration Freddie was accustomed to. It felt deeper, more personal. The boy's mother opened her mouth as if to explain, but Thomas squeezed her hand, signaling he wanted to speak for himself. Freddie noticed the boy's lips tremble as he gathered courage. For a brief moment, the flamboyant frontman, who had commanded stadiums filled with tens of thousands, found himself quietly waiting for the words of a child. Thomas finally spoke, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Mr. Mercury, can I ask you something?" The air grew heavy. Freddie nodded slowly, leaning in closer. Behind him, a stagehand tapped his watch nervously, reminding him of the schedule, but Freddie brushed it off. Something told him this moment mattered more than any encore. Thomas took a deep breath. His eyes glistened as he looked straight into Freddie's. And then, with a courage that seemed too big for his small body, he asked the question that would pierce the performer's heart and reveal the man beneath the legend. Freddie felt his throat tighten as he waited. The corridor seemed to grow quieter, even though the rumble of the crowd outside was still pounding through the walls. Thomas's small hand released his mother's fingers, and he stepped forward just enough to stand. Face to face with his hero. "Do you ever get lonely?" the boy asked. His voice cracked slightly, but his words were clear, heavy with a weight far beyond his 9 years. Freddie blinked, stunned. Of all the things he had expected, a request for a song, an autograph, maybe even a hug, he hadn't been ready for this. A simple, innocent question that cut straight through the glitter and the lights. For a moment, Freddie couldn't find his voice. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. The performer inside him, the witty, flamboyant Freddie Mercury, who always had the perfect quip, seemed to vanish. What remained was Farrokh Bulsara, the boy from Zanzibar, who had once felt like an outsider in every room he entered. The silence stretched. The boy's eyes didn't waver. They were full of truth and something else. Recognition. Somehow, Thomas knew that beneath the crown there was a man who understood solitude all too well. Freddie finally exhaled, his voice quieter than he intended. "That's a very big question, Thomas." His usual booming tone was gone, replaced by something fragile. The words hung in the air, and for the first time in years, Freddie Mercury felt completely disarmed. Freddie leaned back slightly, still holding Thomas's gaze. The boy's question had shaken something loose inside him. He could feel it. The weight of years spent dazzling the world with extravagance, while deep down he often walked alone through the silence of empty hotel rooms. For a split second, he wondered if this child, so young and fragile, could really see through him in a way most adults never had. He cleared his throat, trying to summon the showman again, but the words didn't come with their usual ease. Instead, Freddie sat down on a nearby equipment case, his cape pooling around him like a fallen curtain. It was a gesture so uncharacteristic that even the stagehands paused, watching in quiet surprise. "Lonely," Freddie finally repeated, tasting the word. His voice was softer now, almost confessional. "Sometimes, yes, even when there are thousands of people shouting my name. Especially then, actually." Thomas tilted his head, as if absorbing every syllable. His mother wiped at her eyes, torn between pride and sorrow at seeing her son connect so deeply with someone who lived under the blinding glare of fame. Freddie sighed, running a hand through his damp hair. "But you know," he added with a faint smile, "that's why music exists, to remind us that we're never truly alone. When we sing together, when we share moments like this, the loneliness fades, even if just for a while." The boy nodded slowly, and in that moment it was as if the roles had reversed. Freddie had come to comfort Thomas, but somehow Thomas had drawn out the truth from Freddie, a truth he rarely admitted even to himself. Thomas's small shoulders relaxed as he listened, but his eyes never left Freddie's. It was as though the boy had been waiting his whole life to hear that someone like Freddie Mercury, larger than life, adored by millions, could feel the same quiet ache he sometimes felt. For the first time that evening, Thomas allowed a timid smile to form. Freddie noticed it and leaned in closer, resting his elbows on his knees. "You're a brave little chap, aren't you?" he said, his smile gentle now, stripped of all irony. "Most grown-ups wouldn't dare ask me something like that." The boy's mother placed a hand on her son's shoulder, whispering, "Tell him why you asked." Thomas hesitated, then looked back at Freddie with eyes that glistened under the harsh backstage lights. "Because I get lonely too," he admitted. "Sometimes at school, sometimes even at home. And I thought, if someone like you feels it too, maybe it's not so bad." The words pierced Freddie's chest more sharply than any roar of a stadium ever had. He swallowed hard, fighting the lump in his throat. The boy hadn't come for a song, or an autograph, or even a memory. He had come for reassurance, for proof that loneliness wasn't a flaw, but a part of being human. For a long moment, Freddie couldn't speak. The only sound was the muffled chant of fans outside, still waiting, still unaware that their idol was being undone by a child's honesty in a dimly lit corridor. Finally, Freddie reached out and touched Thomas's hand, his voice trembling as he whispered, "Then we're not alone, are we? Not you, not me. We've got each other, at least for tonight." Freddie held Thomas's hand for a moment longer, then stood and looked around. A piano sat against the wall of the backstage lounge, untouched, waiting for its cue. Freddie's eyes lit up with sudden resolve. "Come with me," he said softly, guiding Thomas by the hand. The boy's mother hesitated, but Freddie gave her a reassuring nod. Stagehands stepped aside, sensing something extraordinary was about to unfold. The distant roar of the audience was still pressing against the walls, but here, in this small corner, a quieter kind of stage was being prepared. Freddie sat at the piano, his fingers brushing the keys with practiced ease. "You know this one?" he asked Thomas, playing the opening chords of Love of My Life. The boy's eyes widened. He knew it instantly. His mother covered her mouth, trying not to cry. Thomas climbed up onto the bench beside Freddie, his legs dangling far above the floor. For the first time that night, his face glowed with pure joy. Freddie began to sing, not with the power that shook stadiums, but with the tenderness of a lullaby. His voice wrapped around the boy like a blanket, warm and fragile. Halfway through the verse, Freddie leaned closer and whispered, "Sing with me, darling, just the words you know." And Thomas did. His voice was faint but steady, blending with Freddie's in a harmony so delicate it seemed to silence the very air around them. For those who witnessed it, 2 crew members, a mother, and a boy, the memory would never fade. In that moment, Freddie Mercury wasn't the legend, the rock god, the untouchable star. He was simply a man, sharing a song with a child who had dared to ask him the question that stripped away the armor of fame. As the final notes of Love of My Life faded into the stillness of the backstage room, Freddie sat motionless for a moment, staring at the piano keys. He knew he couldn't keep this moment hidden away. It was too powerful, too real. He turned to Thomas and smiled, his eyes still shimmering. "Thomas, how would you like to see the crowd from my side of the stage?" he asked. The boy's mouth fell open, stunned. His mother gasped, unsure whether to nod or protest, but Freddie had already made up his mind. He stood, sweeping his cape dramatically over one shoulder, and extended his hand to Thomas. "Come on, darling, tonight, you're with me." The crew exchanged glances. This wasn't in the plan, but no one dared to stop him. They knew when Freddie Mercury set his heart on something, there was no turning back. Moments later, the arena lights dimmed, and the crowd erupted into thunderous applause, expecting Freddie's grand return. Instead, they saw him walk onto the stage, holding the hand of a small boy. The cheering faltered into a hush of curiosity. 40,000 pairs of eyes followed the pair as Freddie led Thomas to the center of the stage. Freddie raised the microphone, his voice carrying not with bravado, but with reverence. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is my friend Thomas. He reminded me tonight of something important, that none of us are ever truly alone." The audience fell silent, the weight of his words pressing into every heart in the arena. Freddie looked down at Thomas, then back at the crowd. "And I think we ought to sing a song together, don't you?" The arena roared in agreement, their anticipation now tinged with tenderness. What had begun as a quiet backstage encounter was about to transform into one of the most unforgettable moments of Freddie's career. Freddie lifted Thomas onto a stool by the piano so the crowd could see him. The boy looked tiny against the vast sea of faces, but when Freddie placed a protective arm around his shoulders, he seemed to grow taller. The arena, which only moments ago had been roaring with energy, was now hushed in anticipation. Freddie began the familiar chords of Love of My Life once more, this time with 40,000 voices ready to join in. But instead of diving straight into the song, he leaned down and whispered into Thomas's ear, "This one's for you, darling. Let's show them how it's done." The first words floated out of Freddie's mouth like a prayer, raw and vulnerable. The audience held its breath, and then, as Thomas softly joined in, the silence broke into a chorus of gentle voices. 40,000 people, singing not with frenzy, but with tenderness, carrying the boy's fragile sound on a wave of love. Tears streamed freely down faces in every corner of the stadium. Tough men clutched their partners' hands. Mothers hugged their children tighter. Even the security guards, standing stiff at the edges of the stage, wiped their eyes, unable to resist the enormity of the moment. When the song ended, the ovation was unlike anything Freddie had ever experienced. It wasn't wild or chaotic, it was steady, heartfelt, the kind of applause that feels like gratitude. Freddie pressed his forehead against Thomas's and whispered so only he could hear, "You've given me the greatest gift tonight." Thomas smiled. A quiet, knowing smile, as if he had always believed this moment was meant to be. And in that instant, Freddie Mercury, the man who could command the largest crowds in the world, felt that for once it wasn't about the music, the fame, or the legend. It was about a boy who asked a single question that revealed the heart behind the crown.